And saw today on the campus of Valonia High School, actually, about the only place that has Wi-Fi locally. Drake Toll joining you alongside. We've got Jack McKenzie and Andrew Robertson in studio watching some soccer, it looks like. At least I got some sports on. And now Morgan Uber, the Big 12 digital correspondent, joins us as always. Morgan, thanks for coming on. I know you've had a busy day today with stuff going on around the conference, but always a pleasure to have you.
Drake, thanks so much, as always, for having me. Pretty crazy to think here we are just one Big 12 championship away from, the conclusion of this year. So got through 3 last weekend, but, baseball next weekend is all we have left. And then we get to look forward to some exciting postseason action between, softball, baseball. We got tennis going on, golf. I mean, it is just everything right now and super exciting for our teams competing on the national stage.
Morgan, as I'm looking up and down these sports here, we did a recap. We did at the top of the show today, kind of the floor and the ceiling for all the Baylor sports that are still remaining. There are, that I can count for Baylor, baseball, softball, men's and women's golf, men's and women's tennis, the only sports that could still be going right now in the spring. And we are basically a weekend away from only 1 or 2 of those still being in action. I mean, spring sports not only are winding down, but there are some schools that have completely wrapped up their athletic year so far.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. It's huge, to see the success that, of course, Baylor and Baylor fans get to, cheer on their teams. But, really from the conference as a whole, and the one that, really comes top of mind right now, because we got 3 different teams in action today is men's tennis. And yesterday, with women's tennis, Texas advancing. So I would say really for the conference, and you look at softball getting 5 teams in, 5 of 7, that's 71%. Huge to get that number in there. And then it's going to be really interesting to see, what happens with baseball and, expectation that Baylor's in there. And along with, potentially 5 teams would be, huge for the conference, 5-6 teams. So, yeah, it's just, all around definitely an exciting spring. And, the biggest thing that I look at, especially from a conference standpoint, is just, hey, look, we made it. 12 months ago, we didn't know if we'd be here. So it is just a really unique postseason, and a little bit emotional to think that we're getting back to this sense of normalcy, and we made it through a full academic year, seeing these teams now be able to compete in the postseason.
It is, Morgan. I was talking to somebody yesterday, the fact that just everything that's opening up, the fact that everything's going back to normal is almost emotional. It's kind of weird how you feel about it as you see people's faces again in the grocery store and restaurants, and things feel like they did before the pandemic, and sports is going back to that as well. Morgan, when it comes to capacity limitations moving forward, I mean, you're seeing a lot of schools open up to 100% in the South, and now a couple of the northern schools are kind of following suit. Has there been any word yet on the Big 12 baseball championship in Oklahoma City and what that will look like yet?
Nothing that I can unveil yet. That announcement should be coming very soon. But to your point, I think with the NCAA making that announcement yesterday saying, hey, we're going to leave it up to these local, the local officials in those places. And, the schools and universities have been already announcing. I mean, we've seen so many of our schools, like you mentioned, getting back to 100% capacity. And I know, the athletic departments are thrilled about that. The student athletes are thrilled. I mean, I can't imagine, being a baseball player, being a softball player, playing at just, 25% capacity of fans. So it really is just a culmination of, all the adversity we faced this year. It's great to kind of see this, positive light at the end of the tunnel. And certainly, just from conversations that, we've been having, it sounds like, football stadiums in the fall are going to be getting back to that as well. Again, depending on, the local guidelines. But, here in the state of Texas, things are looking pretty good. And with a lot of our schools, obviously Baylor being, right there in the heart of Waco, it's looking very positive. And, I'm happy to see it. And I think our student athletes, they deserve getting back to that sense of normalcy and some really good things coming down the pipe. Also yesterday with football media days, being announced by the Big 12 conference office that we are optimistically planning to have those again back in person after a year off last year.
Morgan, do want to let the people at home know that just now ITA released that if you're following along with the action in Orlando, a power outage will affect live streams and live scoring. So Baylor plays at 1 o'clock and fans won't have any live stream or live scoring, at least momentarily. So I think Baylor Twitter and the Baylor Twitter page probably the best place to follow along. But I want to stick there for a second, Morgan. You've got Baylor representing the Big 12 in the men's tennis tournament still. Texas is there as well. And obviously TCU is too, with Baylor and TCU squaring off today from the conference. I mean, to have that much representation into the Elite Eight and the fact that Baylor is still playing today has to be a great blurb for the conference tennis-wise.
It's incredibly special. And you think about how this regular season ended, those three teams, Baylor, TCU, and Texas, all tied for that regular season championship. So it really just, here they are now on the Elite Eight stage. It goes to show just really the equality, the level of, the high level that all three of these teams were playing at this season, and to continue seeing them just be really dominant here in the national stage has been great. And, with TCU and Baylor, from my standpoint, obviously you hate to have to see these two teams go up against each other. You hate to have to see one of these Big 12 teams lose, but I think it's really intriguing because it is a huge rivalry for, both of these programs that get to see a whole lot of each other throughout the season. They know what each other's best stuff looks like. And I was listening into the media day press conference yesterday with head coach Michael Woodson talking about how, three different venues these teams have played at, and they've had three different paths to get there. They've won the doubles point and lost. They've won the doubles point and won. And it's just, so they know what they're going to get in each other. You better bet that these teams, they're both going to be bringing their highest level of competition, highest level of caliber. And I think, for Baylor, this is what they've aspired for all year. They have the potential to win a national championship. I think, all of these teams left on this stage are definitely good enough to do that. But yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. And I sure hope that they get those technical difficulties figured out, because I know people at home are going to want to watch, but I will give a plug to the Baylor men's tennis Twitter page. Their SID that runs that is fantastic. So I'm sure, depending on what happens, he'll keep all of us, up to date on that front.
Max is our guy. We are big fans of Max Calderon on this show, who runs the Baylor men's tennis page. I don't know if I was supposed to give that out, but I did. Folks, some free plug for him. But yeah, there'll be an action here at 1 o'clock against TCU. Morgan, outside of tennis, you also have baseball and softball going on right now as both of those teams enter the postseason. Baseball's got to wrap up the regular season at home, and that starts tonight. So you got the Thursday, Friday, Saturday against Oklahoma. And I mentioned at the top of the show today that, to me, Oklahoma and Baylor have kind of flipped places of where they were supposed to be in conference play. Oklahoma had some top 25 aspirations early on in the season, and that really dissipated. It looks like they're the outside looking in postseason wise, but they've got a shot to even jump Baylor in the Big 12 standings right now. This is no Oklahoma team that can be overlooked.
That's exactly right. I mean, these are two teams, Baylor and Oklahoma. They met back at the end of February, and Oklahoma took that game 9-3. And that's what began Oklahoma's hot streak. They went on, a 13-game stretch where they were averaging 10 runs per game. So Oklahoma got really hot early. And I would say, it's honestly a little bit opposite of what we saw from Baylor. As the season went along, this is a team that just got better and better. So I think, the Sooners are going to be getting a much different Baylor team, but with the same token, I think, Baylor's going to be getting a much different Oklahoma team. But I think, we had talked about the last week just how important these last two series were going to be for Baylor because of, the standings, TCU and Texas, pulling away and Texas Tech up there as well. So really the middle of the pack was coming down between Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma. So it was a little bit of a detriment, I think, to Baylor's seeding last week and, losing that series to Oklahoma State. So they really, this 3-game series against Oklahoma starting tonight is going to be super critical. I'm praying, that the weather, it's been crazy here in Texas, but hoping, we're able to get all these games in. But yeah, it really for Baylor, they've got to come out strong in order to, secure their seedings here for the Big 12 championship. And we are, way less than a week away. It starts next Tuesday with the play-in game there. And so it'll be a full week of baseball basically in Oklahoma City.
Morgan, along with that, the Oklahoma State series, Baylor going on the road to Stillwater. It's an awesome. I don't know if I'd seen that facility really in depth until this past weekend, and it's really great what Oklahoma State has built there. And they play so well at home. They showcased that again, taking 2 out of 3 from Baylor. Though coming into the match, and even now, it feels like Oklahoma State maybe hasn't gotten the love that they deserve on a national scale. They hit a lull in the middle of the season, but that's a really good Oklahoma State team from what I saw.
They're very strong. And I think from them too, we've seen a little bit of ups and downs, from the Cowboys. They were ranked earlier in the top 25. They, fell out and, have been receiving votes and then got back in there. So I think they have, the potential to be dangerous. And we saw that, I think, from them this weekend against Baylor. But, to be honest, I think, the Baylor Bears gave them a little bit to work with there on Friday, unfortunately making 6 errors, ended up losing that game. And then, they went 1 for 11 on Saturday with runners in scoring position. So, you're not going to win a game like that if you're Baylor. So I think, Baylor's right there with them. And, I think on Sunday, Baylor was really able to put everything together. Everything on all cylinders really looked strong and great. So, yeah, but to your point, Oklahoma State, we are really strong as a conference right now in baseball. And, top to bottom, it's been really, really fun to see how all these conference series shake out.
Morgan, going into Oklahoma City and seeing every year I get really excited for Big 12 baseball tournament action, or, I remember going and watching in Hoover, the SEC tournament. It's just the conferences that take the baseball series seriously, especially in the postseason. It's always fun to watch. There's always something magical. And, Baylor's been there to win a couple of those tournaments. Baylor won it in 2018 in the Big 12. And I'm looking at TCU, Texas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Baylor, even Oklahoma. And Kansas State is not crazy out of the mix. I mean, what are we going to see in Oklahoma City here in the next week when all these teams meet?
Hopefully not a lot of rain delays. That's what I know that's been a big characteristic, right, of Oklahoma City and Big 12 baseball is waiting through some rain delays and tornado warnings, tornado sirens. That's, what I've heard from a lot of my colleagues, because this is my first year in actually covering the Big 12 baseball postseason. So really excited to have the opportunity to do so. But, I think, we're going to see a lot of teams that are going to come out and give, their best stuff. And I really think it's, this weekend in particular, looking to see how the seeds are going to be locked up. TCU and Texas certainly have separated themselves, I do think. But at the end of the day, I do think Baylor or an Oklahoma State or an Oklahoma are capable of beating those top 2 teams in this conference. So with the rivalries that are created, I think it's going to be, really exciting, and just a lot of teams coming out and giving each other their best stuff.
Morgan, on the softball side, Oklahoma, the number 1 seed in the country, and they're going to, I'd be surprised if they're pushed remotely in their regional. They should make it the super regional, likely playing Washington there. But I know we talk about it every week, but I don't think it can be overstated just how good Oklahoma has been this season. Going into, you're looking at an Oklahoma team going into the postseason that's lost 2 games. They're unbelievable this year.
We're seeing something historic with Oklahoma, and head coach Patty Gasso called this even before the season started, that she thought that this offense had a chance to be, the best in her history of being a head coach at Oklahoma. And that's saying a lot, with national championships that they have there and all the talent that they've had come through that program. But, they're proving it. And it's not just, a Jocelyn Allo, who has a lot of experience, but it's also these young freshmen, Jada Coleman, Tiara Jennings, who have just come in and been, absolutely explosive and playing, well beyond their years of experience at a collegiate level. And I think a lot of that, though, has to do with this veteran leadership and the older players that have helped them, come along. And they have 3 of the top 10 hitters in the country. It's not a question if they're going to win their regional, Drake. I think it's a question if they're going to do it in run rule fashion at this point. That has been their name of the game. We saw that in the Big 12 championship against a very talented Oklahoma State team. So the Sooners have been taking care of business, and I'm really interested, when they are pressed. You mentioned, they've lost 2 games. They ended up losing that 1 game to Georgia early in the season, but when they're playing, against potentially, it'd be awesome to see a UCLA Oklahoma matchup, the top two teams in the country all season, what that would look like and, how that would push their limits. But I just think Oklahoma is on a different level. I think I've been telling you that all week. They're just far beyond, what we've seen from really anyone else in the country. And a lot of that has to do with they just have an explosive lineup, 1 through 9.
Morgan, with that, you've got Baylor softball in Gainesville for the postseason, the Gainesville Regional. I was worried about where the Lady Bears would be put if they made it in the tournament. They did find their way in as a 2 seed. I think the NCAA, the committee favored them a bit by sending them to Gainesville because I just, the way that it shakes out, it could have been a lot worse, in my opinion, where they landed. What do you make of the Gainesville Regional and Baylor going down there to Florida?
Gosh, I guess it could have been a lot worse, but to be honest, I think this is a really rough draw for Baylor because you look at a Florida team that hasn't lost an SEC series all season. They're number 4 in the country. And when you look at their experience up and down their roster, they have, more experience really than most teams, probably 99.5% of the teams in the country. So I do think this is a really tough draw for Baylor and similar to what I never like to, pick against my Big 12 teams. Of course, I'm a Big 12 homer. I work for the conference, but, this is a regional that I just don't see Florida losing. It's definitely theirs to lose. So we'll see, though, maybe Baylor, the tough competition that they faced in the Big 12 this season will help them on that big stage. But I hate to have to pick against Baylor, but I have Florida advancing and moving on in this regional.
Yeah, that, Morgan, my ceiling when I look at the Gainesville regional, I think the best the Lady Bears could do is maybe take a game or two, but I think this one is Florida's in the end. I thought that the Lady Bears would be sent to Los Angeles, would be over at UCLA. So I guess that's why I figure this is a little bit easier of a road than having to go to Southern California. But with that, Baylor softball, Baylor baseball, Baylor tennis in action. You got the women's golf team, too. They're still alive, competing in the NCAA championships. I don't know if you saw what happened in the Baton Rouge regional, but to have still a couple Big 12 teams that are out there and alive for the championships is always a good thing.
Definitely always a good thing. And we've really, on both the men's and women's golf sides of things have been really strong as a conference, year after year. So I think, it's no surprise to see a lot of our teams, still strong and still competing, and definitely happy to see the Baylor women still going for it.
And then, Morgan, outside of that, recently Baylor landed a huge transfer out of the portal in Buffalo's Jacob Gall to play on the offensive line. He was rated Pro Football Focus as the best left guard in the country, and now he's going to help bolster an offensive line that needed help prior to him coming in. And still, they're still not elite by any stretch of the imagination, but Gall's a big piece to help the Bears.
This was a huge pickup. The way that I see this, and I think, J.D. may have mentioned this too earlier, but it just goes to show that Dave Aranda, this group, they're trying to win now. They're not, going after a grad transfer. I guess he would technically still have 2 years of eligibility in total, but I think that the knowledge and experience that he's going to be able to bring immediately, to the room is huge. And you look at also Baylor, we know that they're going to be running the exact same scheme that Buffalo was running. So you think about, an offensive line, typically in spring practice, you'd like to have, that core group of guys practicing and playing together and understanding each other, because an offense is obviously nothing without their line. But I think, for him, he's going to be able to show the guys, maybe some of the ropes. I think that's, really huge and a great pickup and an aggressive, going after him there in the transfer portal.
It's win now for Dave Aranda. Year 2, there are a lot of football coaches where year 2 is put up or shut up, especially with the way the transfer portal is now. I had a conversation today with someone talking about Scott Drew. If Scott Drew was at Baylor in 2020, if that was his first season and he didn't win, he had the same trajectory as his first 5 years, would he still be here? Just for the way that college athletics has changed in general. So definitely a year where Dave Aranda's got to prove that he can win at Baylor, go to a bowl game, and Gall is a part part of that. So shows it, like you said, they want to win and win now. Morgan, outside of that, media days coming up. I know that's been a big topic of conversation for the Big 12. What is that going to look like? Give us more of insight on Big 12 Media Day and what is in store.
I was so excited yesterday when I finally got to share the news, with the world from the Big 12 Conference Twitter account. It's something that, we've been working on behind the scenes, and we've been saying, we're optimistically planning to have this event in person, still taking advice from, our medical experts and medical team, but everything's trending in the right direction right now, which it's a sign of normalcy, which is great. I mean, to have media days back after, a year off, we did somewhat of a virtual format of a broadcast that I was a part of last year, but this is going to be my first media days, and we'll be out at AT&T Stadium. I know for media that have been a part of it in the past, it's always been a Monday, Tuesday. So I think the Wednesday, Thursday format might be a little bit different. And another thing that is going to be a difference that media will notice is in the past, typically, teams have brought 4, sometimes 5 players, but this year, just due to we're still planning on socially distancing and having those sorts of things in effect. So only 2 players, that's what we're requesting from programs, to bring a high-profile offensive and a high-profile defensive player. And, of course, the head coaches will be there as well. So it's something that, I'm really, really looking forward to, and excited to share, more details as they come about and as I learn them. But, definitely save the dates.
Will there be a Radio Row?
So that's something I can't disclose yet. We're still working through, just due to the, COVID environment and COVID year and adjustments. That's, been a question that you're not the first one to ask that, Drake, but I will share it as soon as we do have that information, on lock and official for everyone.
Well, Morgan, we've gotten this whole remote show thing down pat now. I think all the kinks are worked out, and we're ready to rock in the case that there is a Radio Row at AT&T Stadium. So fingers crossed on our end. But, I mean, everything put together, Morgan, the spring season kind of winding down, but still 4 Baylor squads in postseason play or with championship aspirations. I mean, last question for you. Does that just show really the commitment to athletics, commitment to excellence that Baylor has put together, not just in football and basketball, but really across the board?
Absolutely. That's such a great point. And I think that's, not just Baylor, but really the conference as a whole. Something that we really hang our hats on is the competition, the level of competition in all of the sports that the Big 12 sponsors. And Baylor, it has just been a great example of that really throughout this entire, past year, the 2020-2021 season. I do think, it's a commitment to, what Mac Rhodes has done and the coaches he brings in and the high level of standard that he holds his programs to. And it's definitely has to be exciting to be a Baylor fan. I mean, gosh, all year long, you guys have had something to cheer about, something to look forward to. So I definitely think you make a great point there. And that's really, though, I would say the conference as a whole, that's something that we really pride ourselves on.
Well, Morgan, our Bear Games question of the day today. I can only imagine that you've never heard a Baylor athlete sing, but today's revolves around one of them singing the national anthem. Say we got a stadium of 100,000 people. I'm talking like Alabama LSU football game when it's number 1, number 2. And they have asked one random Baylor athlete from any team to sing the national anthem. While you have zero inside perspective on the singing abilities of any Baylor athlete, I'm sure, I'm going to give you complete freedom to throw out any name that exists on a Baylor roster to sing the national anthem.
Okay, the first thing that popped into my mind, just because I saw just how spunky and how much fun she was at the Big 12 basketball championship, was Queen Egbo. Just really, I guess if we're going with like current players, that'd be one that I could see taking the stage and just completely owning it. I guess let's go with Queen. I have no idea if she has a good voice or not, but maybe she has some uncovered hidden talent that we're about to just unveil.
Queen Egbo, lock it in. Hey, Morgan, thanks so much for joining the show today. As always, we love getting your perspective from the conference's point of view, and to know that Baylor has been such a vital part of the Big 12 success this athletic season is awesome. And like I said, always a pleasure.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to talking with you hopefully next week about some more good things, coming out of Baylor.
Hopefully so. Maybe a tennis national championship. Thanks again to Morgan Uber. That was Big 12 Digital Court.